All right, we are in sunny Scottsdale. We're at IntelliCon with our friends at SCIP, and I'm joined by Ben Schultz, the Senior Manager of Competitive Strategy at Palo Alto Networks. Ben, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We just had Alysse on. Now we have you on. Can you match her hot takes?
Oh, absolutely not, but I'll give it a shot.
What was your path actually into compete? We were just talking with Clara, and she said you had an unconventional journey into competitive intel.
Yeah, absolutely. I had no idea what CI was until about 10 years ago. So I started my journey as a defense contractor, got morphed into security, and then they closed that building. And then I ended up at Target in their security operations center. So I've used a lot of security products up until this point. And I saw some weirdness at Target going on. So I'm like, I should move on. So I actually knew Alysse from a separate career path. She was my mentor and a senior project at my college. So I called her up and I said, "Do you got anything over there?" Because I knew she was at a security company. And she said, "Yeah, you want to try CI?" Well, quick Google search, what the hell is CI? I'm like, okay. It seems like a way that I could influence products. And I've used a lot of shit products in my days as a practitioner. So why not? Let's go. So interviewed, did a project on digital SLR cameras. I had to compare the market and see, how do they stack up? Which one would I buy? And I was grilled by some of our other employees, and they're like, "This guy knows his stuff. He can do analysis and all that. And why not?" And he knows the security industry. So flash forward 10 years later, and here I am.
So along those 10 years, as we asked Alysse at the end there, what was your biggest mistake and what you learned? What's yours over these 10 years? What's the biggest mistake or learning you've had from when you entered the profession to where you are today?
Yeah, so probably my biggest mistake is being too passionate about the security products and failing to realize what my actual role should be as a competitive intelligence professional. So teaching those about the market, actually recommending actions and trying to persuade them to take that actions, being the storyteller. Instead, I failed to realize that, and I gave the recommendations and I said, "You should do this." And they didn't do it. And I took it to heart. I was pissed. I was hurt. I thought they should have listened to everything I said, and they didn't. And I took it personally. And I took that as a learning moment to say, okay, that's not my place. I'm not the decision maker. I'm here to give them the best information at the time for them to make the next decision. So it kind of shaped the way that I did my research and into telling them a broader story. So here's what you need to know now. Here's how it's going to impact it, rather than just saying, do this. So big learning curve.
How do you manage to kind of deal with that? Like, in terms of, it must be so frustrating when you have a recommendation, but they don't follow the recommendation you put out there. Like, how do you handle that, like, internally, and how do you, like, not let that kind of bog you down with work?
Well, I drink a lot of bourbon. That helps a little bit, but just really, I use that as motivation to get the best intelligence possible. But I also leverage my experience as a previous practitioner to tell them how making that decision will impact butts and seats. So if you make the person buying your product happy, they're going to renew your product. They're going to be a champion for your brand. So really working in that angle instead of trying to drive home the point that thou shall do this, stepping back and saying, if you do this, then you'll have a customer for life. So trying to drive that point home. So it's still hard for me when you see, it's like the person that knows the train's coming and you can see it and you warn somebody and then they get squished. You're like, well, tough shit. You got squished, but at least I tried to tell you. So it's kind of stepping away and saying I did the best that I could at the time.
What is the biggest lesson you've learned from your career with Alysse?
Oh, man. Well, I'm an introvert. So can you imagine an introvert working with Alysse? Kind of step out of your shell sometimes. There's a good opportunity to kind of let people know abrasively that, no, we can't do it this way, and kind of push them a little more. So she's actually pushed me into stepping out of my shell, doing public speaking and all that kind of stuff. So I've spoken at 3 SCIP conferences, SIMICon in Berlin. So really good mentor moment of, stepping outside your shell. So, kind of putting yourself out there, being the loud voice in the room when you need to be, but still being reserved. I like to wait till the last second.
How has that learning that lesson, kind of knowing, like having that ability now to speak up when you feel passionately about something, how has that impacted your like career in Compete, and how Compete is like being perceived within an organization?
Yeah, so I think kind of it's a hybrid mix. So now that I'm managing people, I seem to get drawn to introverts as well. So kind of pushing them to step forward. I'm kind of in the competitive strategy role. So looking at the product perspective from a more strategic path. And I know Alysse doesn't like that strategic path sometimes. So trying to roll that into, here's the strategy and here's how we enable sellers by doing that competitive strategy research. So really pushing those folks to see both sides of the coin and then get out there in front of sales. So, if we do competitive strategy research and we don't tell it to the sellers, it's like it's in a vacuum. So pushing my direct reports to kind of break the shell and go tell sales about it. And we like to sugarcoat things in battle cards and say we're awesome, but sales also needs to know our weaknesses. So that's where I push my folks to go out and say, okay, here's where we kind of fall flat, and teach them about that. Kind of going full circle back to the butts and seats. The people need to know the negatives of your product. And that's, if I was a skeptical security operations center analyst, that's the question I would ask you immediately. Like, what do you suck at? So if you can't answer that question and the sales isn't able to do that, then you're kind of boned.
Being the unbiased truth teller. If you had 10 minutes to get up on stage tomorrow and talk in front of all of the folks attending IntelliCon, what would your topic be?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think there's a huge imposter syndrome in CI, and because nobody really knows what they're doing. I don't think, honestly, it's different in every single industry. Pharma, oil and gas, your lead times are 10, 15 years. So you got a little leeway there. If I were to transplant you and throw you into high tech, you'd fail miserably. So we can get together as a team here at this conference and kind of share ideas. But at the end of the day, you go back in your seat and there's no cookie cutter approach to CI. So getting up there and saying it's okay not to know what you're doing, and really drive home the point that you can use as many tools as you want, but you need to, at the end of the day, do what's right for your company. So bring the tools together and find out what works best for your company. So working with what you've got and bringing in other vendors that can kind of help you get there. So not trying to roll your own. So for example, I worked for a small startup. We used Google Sites and we used RSS feeds from Google, and it was a mess just to get the ball rolling. And then people are like, you're ineffective. Now what? So then you bring in other tools. But at that point, I had no idea what I was doing. I just did it to do it. So, working with what you've got, but don't feel like you're failing. I think that's a big thing that I would tell people just getting into it, because I still have my moments where I feel like I have no idea what's going on.
Wow. I think that's a great way to end this conversation. That's a really... Oh, we've got, for everyone listening, if you're not viewing this, we have our live audience as well for Ben, and super fan Pablo also has a question.
I have to lean in more. I have one question. So it's clear, the amazing relationship you have with Alysse. You've worked with her in multiple companies. I'd love to ask, what is the one thing that you go back and forth and you disagree on?
Ooh, real Oprah Winfrey moment. The importance of actually being in the C-suite. We actually did a co-presentation at a conference called Getting Your Head Out of the C-Suite. I think there's a time and place for that, especially with strategy. So if you don't know where the C-suite's trying to steer the ship, you're going to have a bad time. But to her point, if you don't enable sales, you're also going to have a bad time. So there's this violent disagreement, but I think we agree that you need both. But, I kind of want to stick my head in the C-suite a little bit just to find out what's going on and where they're trying to steer the ship. But that's one contention. Then, Waffle House versus IHOP. It's another contentious thing.
Who is Waffle House?
Waffle House is everything.
But
are you team Waffle House?
I am team Waffle House.
I'm team Waffle
I was trying to create controversy.
You should have stir up drama for the content. He's a marketing man at heart. All right. Thank you so much, Ben. And let's go have some fun at IntelliCon.
Thank you.